You're listening to the Persistence Mastery Podcast to give your communication skills the clarity edge with your host, Paul Leon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. HubSpot published an article about a study showing that the average turnover of sales representatives is 35%, with B2B sales representatives being as high as 45%. Where employee turnover was only 13% in other industries. And when I read those statistics and I look back at my substantial experience in sales, it tells me a factor that these are false ideas about what sales is when we're first entering the workforce or the industry of being a sales professional. So in this episode, we're really going to focus on some false ideas that a lot of professionals in this industry have. And with that said, let's jump right into the content. The first false idea is that seniority or the most seasoned salesperson is the best salesperson. This is not true. It's totally false. Now, I will say that the more seasoned salesperson or the person who may have more tenure may have a bigger pipeline than you, but that doesn't make them the best professional salesperson. I remember when I first got into sales, I was recommended by a past manager that you need to meet with Ralph. Ralph was supposedly, from what everyone told me, was the best salesperson. He had the best pitch, he had the best communication, he was awesome. And he had some of the highest closing ratios exceeding 50%. And I got pretty excited. And I said, well, I can't wait to meet this guy, Ralph. And in my mind, I thought he was going to be wearing a black and white tuxedo, drinking a martini, basically James Bond. Instead, it was a beige suit with undone top buttons and a noticeable ketchup stain on his shirt, not James Bond. What mattered was not what he was wearing, though, what was between his ears. And that was most important. So I asked him questions and I took notes. And I offered to be helpful and really just try to engage with his wisdom and his unique style of communicating consultations. Here's the lesson from that quick micro story. It's not the seniority, it's the skill. And the value of advice from a more seasoned salesperson is incredibly valuable. And you should not discount that by any way, shape, or form. But you cannot drive yourself into the idea that this person has more time, therefore they're the better salesperson. Absolutely not. It's the person with the most skill and who's doing the most action that can outsell a senior person or person with more experience anytime, anywhere when it comes to sales. So if you're new getting into sales or you've been there for a minute, it might be time for if you're brand new, take a step back, look at what skills can you elevate. B, with that said, if you have been in sales a long time, but your numbers are dipping, maybe you're not getting that high closing ratio. What can you do? And what's the common denominator that a new salesperson and maybe a seasoned salesperson who's struggling has in common? I'm going to tell you this right now. It's what I said earlier. It's what's between the ears. And when I say what's between the ears, I mean you got to read, listen, and associate, which brings me to my next false idea. False idea number 2 is that you can know everything there is about sales. If you're somebody just getting into sales or you're sitting there, standing, etc., driving, and you're saying to yourself, I've been in sales a long time, I pretty much know everything there is to know about selling skills. Well, you're hurting yourself. And here's why. When I first got into sales, the number one thing that always resonated with me was you got to read, listen, and associate. And that associate's important simply because when I say associate, I mean associate with that sales professional who has what you want, has that high closing ratio. You don't want to be that person on the team who complains about everything or says that person gets more leads than me, etc. Instead, you want to replace that. And that might sound like brainwashing to you. And it is, because everything is brainwashing. I was on a plane and I met a family where they told me there were a bunch of Swifties going to a concert. And I honestly did not know what a Swiftie was. That means a Taylor Swift fan. I thought it meant some type of smoothie you get from Planet Smoothie or one of those smoothie shops. And it amazes me because he shared with me on this flight that he paid $5,000 for him, his two kids, and his wife to go see Taylor Swift. That's $20,000. And it blows my mind that somebody can do that, but it's so difficult these days to say, hey, you should listen to some professional development for 10 to 15 minutes a day, read for 10 to 15 minutes every other day, and associate with winners. That blows my mind that that's such a struggle. I know for me, when I first got into sales, I had a lot of windshield time driving in the car. And what was more in scope was the ability to listen, the ability to listen to CDs from other sales professionals. And I will tell you this, a lot of it did blend together. There were times where one salesperson said the same thing and another person said it in a different way. And you have to catch those things and it can make you complacent. But here's the thing, you never know when that nugget's going to hit. You never know when that light switch is going to turn on. So, false idea number 2 is you feel or think you know everything there is about sales and you don't continue on continuous improvement, while it's the sales professional who continues his improvement on a daily, weekly basis, yearly basis that really can outsell the competition. False idea number 3 is that the salesperson with the more product knowledge is always the one that wins. This is not true. It's not the salesperson with the most product knowledge, but the salesperson who has the most interpersonal skills that wins most sales. Now, don't get me wrong and don't misunderstand me. Product knowledge is essential because it gives you confidence when you can speak to your product. However, don't think that if you're new that and somebody else has all the product knowledge in the world that you're not as good as them. That's false. I have come into companies with very little product knowledge and closed 50% as high as closing ratios with very little product knowledge. I'm going to tell you how I do that. I focus on my interpersonal skills. I focus on listening, asking quality questions, understanding what objections are. And I can do that with very little product knowledge and still come out on top because I can outwork my competition through calls, negotiation, and prioritizing that customer's needs. Now, I will tell you this though, when you first get into the job, you do need to focus on product knowledge. That's just the facts, and that's normal. But don't get discouraged at the fact that maybe you don't know enough, or maybe because you don't have a lot of product knowledge as this person, that you're not going to be as good as them. That's a false idea. A person who can sell can outsell anybody with the most product knowledge. I've seen this firsthand in many different industries where one person would say, I'm this person. I know everything about this product. And then you give them a sales title and ask them to work with people, and they fail. And they fail miserably, not because they're bad people, not because they can't sell. It's because they didn't want to focus on the interpersonal skills, which is really 70% of the consultative process. The ability to recognize challenges, the confidence to ask for the sale or dial it back when you need to, and taking notes, but prioritizing the customer needs. Sounds like common sense, but common sense is not common. So, false idea number 3 that the salesperson with more product knowledge always wins. False. It's the salesperson with stronger interpersonal skills that outwins product knowledge. But don't misunderstand me. You still need to know your product in and out in collaboration with your interpersonal skills to be an unstoppable force in your sales career. False idea number 4 is that salespeople are just lucky. This is a big one, and it's one that can really damage your sales career. If you don't want to just be another statistic, you need to change the mindset that some salespeople are just lucky instead of sales is created through strategic efforts and massive action toward a specific result. That is what luck is in sales. And there are outlier situations that sometimes happen. I remember that there was a sales professional I worked with, Ronza, where she got a lead and it was a laydown. And a laydown is just somebody who was going to give you a credit card no matter who was in front of them. And this person bought about a $30,000 sale. in under 20 minutes. Pretty rare situation. Let me give you an example of the opposite. I had done a sale very early in my career where this person was actually fraudulent. This was when I was in the cellular business back in the day. And I remember that I started one month negative 50%. So I would have to get to 0% just to hit my quota this one month. And this would happen sometimes to some salespeople. And they usually would give up, or they would say, well, I'm already in the hole. I'll just take the hit this month and then restart next month. There's no way I'm going to make any money. Let me tell you what I did. I focused on my process. I focused on my calls. I focused on staying active. I had to accept the fact that, not saying just it is what it is, but the acceptance of this person was fraudulent. It looked almost real. He had the t-shirt, he had everything. He had a business account. And I fell for it. And anybody would have in that situation. And all my other salespeople kept enabling me to feel sorry for myself. But instead of feeling sorry for myself, I had to focus on the sales and I had to focus on my family. So I went at it and I still stayed on. You know how that month ended up? I went over my sales quota by 15%. So I got out of the hole, hit my quota 100%, and then ended that month at 115% in sales. So when I tell you that sales is not just about luck, there's outlier situations, but it's your strategic efforts through massive actions will dictate your sales outcome at the end of the month, year, day, not luck. The fifth false idea is that I don't want to get into sales and be too pushy. And I totally understand that mindset. There's this stigma, and it really is associated with people who sell cars, which I think is kind of offensive because those are people too. Those are people who have to feed their families. And it's kind of an essential thing. We need cars. And those people work their butts off. But a lot of the fear of being pushy kind of comes from that stigma of that industry. And here's the thing, it's not just car salespeople. I see it in many different industries: software, backup power, etc. There's pushy people who are not in sales, there's pushy managers also. So there's a difference between being pushy and being persistent. You can be politely persistent and not be offensive. I'll give you an example. So I have a voicemail script that I recommend, and it's nothing that is amazing or it comes going to break the industry world. But I remember I wrote it a long time ago when I was back in the first getting into sales in Miami, and it's just leaving your phone number in the beginning, saying your value proposition, leaving your phone number at the end. So it may go something like this. This is Paul with X Company, 407 496 6240, 407 496 6240. And then I'd give my reason for following up. I'm just reconnecting on your questions you had on this proposal. I know we had a time today where we wanted to reconnect. 407 496 6240, 407 496 6240. I left that message 2 days later. Hey, this is Paul with X Company, 407 496 6240, 407 496 6240. I know I missed you the other day. Not a problem. I'm going to call you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. But if you need to reconnect with me before then, 407 496 6240, 407 496 6240. I never left that message sounding irritated, and I was never mad at the client. But here's the reality: until they say no, the ball's still in play. I left that message for this one person 22 times. Let me say that again, because it's not two, it's 22 times. What happened on the 23rd call was I heard this: thank you so much for calling me. I have been extremely busy. I have not been trying to avoid you. And I said, it's okay. It's not a problem. Say that with me if you're listening to this. It is not a problem. That will save you a lot of grief in sales. And she actually told me that she couldn't buy, that it wasn't the right time for their business. But that rejection did lead to a referral, which led to me hitting my quota that month. So you never know what's going to happen from massive follow up. But the fear of being pushy, that's a false idea. What you want to do is be politely persistent with prospects who are undecisive as you pursue other opportunities. The last one is rejection is personal. And I really want you to stay with me on this. A lot of people who first get into sales or have been in sales a long time, it can feel that way. That rejection is personal. Rejection is an event, not a person. Let me say that again. Rejection is an event, not a person. And unfortunately, I have been rejected in sales more than I care to admit. And I have had weeks where I've made 400 cold calls and got one appointment. And those are tough weeks. So you might be asking yourself, well, how do you overcome rejection then? How does rejection not hurt when you're in a sales career? And I'm going to give you that answer. Pipeline. The stronger your pipeline, the less you'll feel of rejection. What do I mean by that? The less leads you have, the more personal those rejections feel. Think about it. If you only have 17 leads in your pipeline, you have 30 days to make your numbers. It can really feel daunting on you to really move the needle. But if you had 300 leads and 30 days, it wouldn't feel as bad because if somebody doesn't buy from you in this meeting, it's going to be somebody. Don't misunderstand my mindset for arrogance or being rude. I'm thinking about your best interest, and here's why. Your confidence should be in a sales process that's built from inspiration, not desperation. And that's a big thing that a lot of sales professionals miss. So, when you sell from inspiration, that is tied to how many leads you have. And if you're just getting started, you have to be practical with yourself. Typically, 0 to 60 days is where you're building that pipeline. You're building that rapport, that relationship with those customers. However, if you're a more seasoned sales professional and you're like, well, my pipeline's getting dry, what do I do? I would recommend this. If you're working for a company, connect with your manager. Say, hey, I really want to hit my numbers. Where are there opportunities for me to grab some more leads so I can ensure my pipeline is full and start to strategize? Now, if you're your own entrepreneur and you're having to sell, you're going to have to take a step back and just accept the reality. And I know that's really hard to hear, and that's not a fun conversation to have with yourself. But I will tell you this. As somebody who has not hit their numbers and as somebody who's been in the top 10% of sales in Fortune 100 companies, you will get on the other side of this. You will move forward, but you have to keep growing. You have to keep moving, and you have to not take rejection personal. My recommendation is if you're new, you should strive for 20 quality meetings a month, ideally 30. And if you're a more seasoned professional, you know your product, consultative skills, you definitely want to have a minimum of 30, but your goal should be 30 plus quality consultations, especially in your consultative sales process. So again, these false ideas, remove them and replace them with what you've heard in today's episode. And if you know another salesperson struggling, and I'm sure you do, because like I said in the beginning, it can be as high as 35% and 45% turnover for sales professionals. And it's a hard gig. I know it. I'm there with you. I feel your pain. And a lot of people don't know, and that's okay. But you will get on the other side of it. But the longer you take to not embrace more positive thinking ideas in your sales process, the longer it takes for you to hit your goals and exceed expectations as a sales professional.
Thank you for listening to the Persistence Mastery Podcast. Subscribe to where you listen to podcasts. And if you want to hire Paul to train or speak for your team, visit persistencemastery.com and fill out the request training form.